Welcome to another day in the Matrix. This is Red Pill Podcast 225, and I just realized when I was preparing this podcast how wild it is to be creating the 225th podcast, which I've done for 225 weeks in a row, and it landed in the year of 2025, the 225 year. I had to think about it for a minute because there's 52 podcasts per year. What are the odds of this being possible for this exact podcast to happen in this exact year? Just wild. And what's even crazier is the fact that this was the first Red Pill ever. And today and that date have the same exact date numerology. 72 double-digit date numerology and 18 standard date numerology, which both add up to the number 9. Just like the year we're in, 225, and the podcast add up to 9. Like how? So yeah, the code lives through all of us, and here we are, over 4 years later, 225 weeks in a row. Now in the year 2025, the 225 year, removing the 0, using the rules of numerology, and now let's get into Red Pill Podcast 225, celebrating a new all-time high for XRP. And as of today, we now have 2 times more daily closes for XRP above $3 than we had above $2 in the last cycle in early 2018. So we can now confirm without hesitation that XRP is officially in price discovery. So we have a lot to cover today, and we want to get straight into today's podcast. But as always, make sure to get relaxed, get comfortable, grab yourself a cup of coffee or tea if it's a little earlier in the day, or a glass of wine or beer if it's getting a little later out there in the Matrix. And also make sure to comment below this post here on Patreon to vote on the altcoin that you'd like me to cover in next week's Red Pill podcast. But please, before you leave a comment, just make sure that you use the search function here on Patreon to check that I have not covered that project in at least 3 months. So if it's been over 3 months since I reviewed that altcoin, or if I've never covered that altcoin before, as long as it has at least 1 year of chart history, you can go ahead and comment below here on Patreon, not in the YouTube comment section, but actually in this Patreon post. Please comment the name of that altcoin and include the ticker symbol next to it as well. And whatever submissions get the most likes, those top 4 will be selected for next week's Red Pill. Now, before we get into today's decode, since I brought up price discovery for XRP and as we're currently trading at new all-time highs, I quickly want to recap something that I shared over on X a couple days ago. Maybe you saw it, maybe you didn't. That's of course okay, but if you'd like, feel free to follow over at my X account. It's at Waters Above. Just spell above without the O. And I believe I'm pretty close to 100K followers over there, so that'll definitely be a milestone for this channel. But anyways, a couple days ago I shared this post over on X, and I said last cycle's all-time high for XRP was January 4th, 2018. And if you take 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days added to January 4th of 2018, you end up on August 11th, 2025. And I just brought this up because 777 code is the jackpot number. So please keep this in mind because we're effectively in price discovery for XRP right now. And this could very well be a time frame for us to anticipate a major move to the upside for XRP, which is something that I've been warning you guys about for a while now. And definitely mark your calendars for August 11th, which is particularly interesting because it will be 2 days after the upcoming full moon in August, as you can see here, on August 9th. And the significance of that is because back in January 2018, this date right here, that was also exactly 2 days after the full moon that month is when XRP hit its all-time high. And the timing from when we had a new daily candle close all-time high in December 2017, leading up to this date, when the official top came in at the start of 2018, it actually took a very similar amount of days for the timing between this date of July 17th, when we effectively closed at a new all-time high, and the upcoming date that I just revealed to you in this decode of August 11th. So the timing between that technical breakout into price discovery in January 4th, 2018 is a very similar amount of time for what we just did here in July and August 11th. Again, aligning with my theory of a local top in August and likely not later than the first week of September, before the total lunar eclipse on September 7th, right? Now, this is not news to you guys. I've been talking about this quite a bit, and specifically for XRP, I revealed a while ago that, well, I even shared it in more detail last month, how I'm anticipating the next major impulse to the upside for XRP in late July and early August. So if this does come to fruition and we're topping out around August 11th for XRP, that fits perfectly into that time frame. Now, the thing that everyone wants to know, of course, is more data on price and everything. Even though I've shared this with you guys many times, we will get back to this a little bit later, because I do want to spend a little bit more time on XRP for this podcast, but we do need to talk about some other things as well that are a lot more influential into what will make XRP do its next big move to the upside. So we're a very neutral channel here at Waters Above. We're not picking any sides. We're not Bitcoin maxis or members of the XRP army or any of that. We're neutral. We're wolves amongst sheep. And it's important that we take into account what are the most important energetic factors that move these markets and not isolate anything, right? So getting back to this whole theory about the market moving up through most of this month and partially through the month of August, I also mentioned just a couple moments ago, quote, likely not later than the first week of September before the total lunar eclipse on September 7th, end quote. Although for some altcoins, it could take those additional weeks to play out. So whilst we could have XRP topping a little bit early, we could have some other altcoins topping a little bit later, which is pretty typical in an altcoin rotation through different sectors. We also saw this back in 2017 and in our last cycle in 2021 as well. So please keep this in mind, because what I just shared with you sets the tone for today's podcast. Now let's dive into the week ahead, because what I'm about to share with you is going to be absolutely crucial for the setup into the month of August. Starting with tomorrow, July 21st, because this is tied to pretty much the most important, if not the most important date of this year, April 7th in 2025. The 4/7 Gregorian date, the 47 code. This was the date that marked the bottom of the tariff crash, which was exoterically caused by Donald Trump, the 47th president of the United States. Again, another powerful 47 code. And the reason why tomorrow is significant is because the number 47 has a hidden code within it, and that is the number 15. Because 47 is the 15th prime number. And remember, April 7th was actually the start of the 15th week of this year. And here we are with July 21st being exactly 15 weeks later. This also happens to be 105 days apart. The 105 becomes the number 15 by removing the 0 using the rules of numerology. And the mirror number of 47, of course, is the number 74. Perhaps some of you remember on April 7th, as the entire market was crashing, Bitcoin hit 74K. We would also write this date as 7/4 internationally. And the following day, Tuesday, July 22nd, has a 74 double-digit date numerology. So this puts even more emphasis on the significance of this week ahead by the code. And also keep in mind the April 7th date was the 97th day of this year, making this specific day even more significant because the number 97 conceals the key code for this year, which is the number 25, as we're in the year of 2025, often shortened to just 25, and also the Hebrew year of 5,785, which adds up to 25 before reduction. So 97 is the 25th prime number. Also, we're in the Chinese year of the snake, and the snake is the serpent, giving you 97 in gematria, in the same cipher as crypto, giving you 97. Again, the 25th prime number. Let me just quickly show you. In this upcoming Thursday, July 24th, is 205th day of this year. Using the rules of numerology again, take out the 0, you return back to the 25 code again. So this is very significant, guys. And speaking of the Chinese year of the snake, this Wednesday will actually be 25 weeks from the start of the new Chinese lunar year. So January 29th was the Chinese New Year this year, the year of the wood snake. And you can see that this Wednesday will be 25 weeks since that significant date. So we're now throwing in all these different layers into the system. So this definitely makes this upcoming 205th day of the year, which has the 25 code already, and including the end date here, connecting these two significant dates, we have 25 weeks and 2 days. That's the 252 code. It's the palindrome of the number 25. So we have 25 going forwards and backwards. This is all syncing together for this upcoming week. And on top of all of that, July 24th is the date of the upcoming new moon. It'll be a new moon in Leo. And Leo has this 15 in gematria, coming back to where we started with today's decode since April 7th, the date that we were just talking about, the 4-7 date with the 4-7 code. It's the start of the 15th week of the year. Again, 47 is the 15th prime number. We have Leo giving you 15. The new moon that'll be this week is in Leo, and it will be 15 weeks since this particular date. A very significant date because all of the markets crashed into this exact date. So that makes this week ahead packed with connections to literally the most important date of this year and all of our key numbers for this year. It's very significant. It's very rare that we have this many connections. So if you watched last week's Red Pill, which focused on decoding specifically Bitcoin's price action during Mercury retrograde, not altcoins, but Bitcoin's price action during Mercury retrograde, then you'd remember that I said regarding phase 2 of Mercury retrograde, which is the first 4 to 7 days after Mercury stations retrograde, we typically see a bullish fake out where Bitcoin will move up by day 5 to 7. And in many iterations, we actually have a short-term correction after this fake out to the upside. So with Mercury stationing retrograde on the 18th, this past Friday, you'll see that this upcoming Thursday, including the end date, is pretty much putting you there in the sweet spot on the day of the new moon. And this is very important because it's making me consider how the past couple of years we've had dumps around the July new moon. It's very common on the August new moon. We'll get to that a little bit later, but lately it's also been very common on the July new moon as well. And new moons lately have just been dumps. So this could be something for us to mentally prepare for if that turns out to be the case. But please remember what I've been saying for months now, that overall, July and August should be bullish. And this means that if we are to entertain a potential correction late next week around the new moon, then remember, we can actually push up higher between now and then. And a week after the new moon, it'll all just look like a continuation of the uptrend anyways. So what I'm saying here is to not expect anything drastic. And if we do see a notable correction, it'll likely get bought back up very soon. This is actually something we just had happen in last month, right over here. Got bought back up very, very fast. So we had this when the US striked those Iranian bases, and literally the next day we were recovering. We could see Bitcoin had a 4.4% green daily close candle, a $4,500 move to the upside after this kind of fake out to the downside, because that's effectively what it was. It was a bear trap. The liquidity was there. This was an opportunity for the whales to swallow more Bitcoin, and that's what they do. That's why it's very typical you see these shakeouts to the downside before breakouts. I mean, we see it on pretty much every single chart. This was on Dogecoin. It's the best time to buy. XLM, best time to buy. HBAR, best time to buy. Where was ETH? Look at this shit. Best time to buy. So when it's tied to an exoteric event, it's usually a very good time to take advantage. And yeah, here we are. We've just had a exoteric event on the world stage tied to crypto, and it was Crypto Week, and Donald Trump signing over the Genius Act into law. So all eyes are on crypto. I've already warned you guys about this. And now we'll be opening up Monday with this initial Mercury retrograde energy, right? When he signed the Genius Act into law, it was only like an hour or so, maybe an hour and a half left in the trading day for the traditional markets. So this fresh week ahead will be very telling at what the market maker wants to do, but we've seen this happen before with the launch of the Bitcoin ETF, with the launch of the Ethereum ETF. I'm not saying that it's sell the news, but it is kind of the environment where if enough attention's on the market, and especially while we're pumping over the weekend for altcoins and we see Bitcoin dominance just absolutely cratering to the downside, this is kind of the setup for a tiny little rug pull. Tiny. I'm not calling for a crash here, but we can anticipate just the typical Mercury retrograde chop, right? And remember what I said in this week's written market updates. Sent out a couple of those written updates that if Bitcoin chops around here at the current prices and Bitcoin dominance continues to fall, it actually creates the perfect environment for altcoins to continue higher to the upside, which is the pattern we've always seen. And there's been a couple of times in the past history where we're seeing a major breakout in something like Ethereum, for example, and you'll get one of these like chops to the downside. And it let me give a better example of 2020 into 2021. I think here is great. So we see a major correction in the midst of everything. You know, this was 24 hours, a 33% correction for ETH. Keep in mind that Bitcoin just had a 33% correction from the recent highs over here to here. Like, ETH did this in a single day. And then when you look back at how quickly it was bought back up, it didn't really feel like much happened, you know? So we're looking at over here, by the way. Apologies. Just this little blip. Barely realized it. We got this crazy breakout for ETH. Let me see if the fibs align with this, because they probably do. Yeah, you see this right here. We have a major breakout through the golden pocket heading into the 888. We're about to head into the 888 right now. And once we get into this territory, we get very overheated, likely on daily RSI, and then we see a 30% correction in the midst of this, and then a continuation of the breakout. Just very, very quick things. Look at this daily close. This daily close for Ethereum was 19% down on the daily close. Dude, no one's ready for this shit. This is the kind of stuff that happens in an alt season, by the way. So I'm not calling for a crash. I'm just calling for this type of stuff to occur. You know, very, very quick, very sharp, bought back up pretty much in the same day, 24, 48 hours later. So speaking of Bitcoin dominance, since I brought that up, we do need to address the fact that if we go to the daily chart on Bitcoin dominance, we have Bitcoin dominance at its most oversold. It's crazy to see, man. It's at 12 on the daily RSI. This is the lowest we've seen since May 2021. which by the way was like the crash bottom for Bitcoin dominance. The alt season was happening all over here. By here, it was just a completely, drained out market. But remember, most of the coins topped over here when Bitcoin dominance was already at 54%. And then a lot of like the NFT shitcoin, random stuff just went crazy here. But it was pretty late already. Most of the big caps have finalized their move by April into May. So the difference between what they did by this moment right here and like April 15th to like May 14th, it was probably only the final 25% of the move. But most of the move was happening right there, believe it or not. So I do just need to address the fact that we have one of the quickest falls in Bitcoin dominance's daily RSI that I've ever seen. It's down at 12 right now. It's pretty dramatic move. So yeah, this move back here in May, by the way, I think RSI was 14. Yeah, it was 14.3. Today it's 12. So that's very rare. But that, of course, is just the daily read. It's always best practice to zoom out to higher time frames, such as the weekly. And over here, when we look at the weekly, I'm going to turn off all this noise to just make things nice and clean. When we look at the weekly, we're only at 42, 41. Also, so that means we have plenty of room to go. Also, what we see on the weekly chart for Bitcoin dominance is that the biggest weekly red candle that we've had since early January 2024, we are seeing a 5.5% red weekly candle on the Bitcoin dominance. This is pretty dramatic, all right? So this feels like alt season vibes for sure. Back here in November, we did it in a couple weeks. Right now, we're just really dropping fast. So it's a little fishy, if you know what I mean. So this is the biggest red weekly candle we've had in Bitcoin dominance going back to the beginning of 2024. And guess what happened back then? Remember? The launch of the first official Bitcoin ETF, which is interesting because this week we're having this major breakdown in Bitcoin dominance while it was crypto week. Another all eyes on crypto moment. As I mentioned a couple weeks ago when I decoded crypto week in Red Pill, I think it was 223. So this was, of course, an all eyes on crypto moment with the launch of the Bitcoin ETF. So it's the reason I say this is interesting is because after the Bitcoin ETF launched in January 2024, I'm just going to show you on the charts real quick, we had this dip here. It's not really noticeable on a weekly. If I bring it up on a daily, you'll see what it looked like. So it was over here. The Bitcoin ETF was approved here at a peak. We had a pretty decent correction. During this time, Bitcoin dominance was also coming down pretty rapidly, like as rapidly as it was this week. And then we had kind of a little weird micro inverse head and shoulders that led to another bullish impulse. This quick correction right here was like a sentiment reset after that historic event for the crypto market. And then after that correction, Bitcoin broke out for the following 7 weeks. Now, with the timing of everything leading into the upcoming lunar eclipse, this actually is pretty close to aligning with what we're bringing up right here. Essentially, imagine if we had a quick correction into the upcoming new moon, and it doesn't need to be much. It could be literally 113K, 114K. It doesn't have to be too much. I'm not calling for crashes. I'm not calling for any of that madness. I'm just saying like a technical back test, maybe wick down into 112 perhaps. Keep in mind, by the way, Bitcoin dominance dropping further during all of this means that we don't need alts to sustain their corrective energy either. Alts can just keep going up and up and up and up from now, which is why I completed my altcoin reaccumulation back in May. Because I didn't give a shit if I was early. Who cares about being early when you have 1,000% upside on a lot of these altcoins, right? Who cares? I know a lot of people are now just wanting to FOMO in. We got to remember that's what makes the altcoins go up right now. It's because everyone's paying attention to crypto. The average investor doesn't have, they're not going to buy Bitcoin at 118K, and most people don't even want to buy ETH. The only reason some people are probably getting into ETH right now is to actually buy other altcoins that they cannot get on traditional exchanges. So they could use the ETH on Coinbase, for instance, on Coinbase Wallet, and play around with the other alts that are available over there, which you couldn't just do with Fiat. You couldn't do it with dollars. So just keep that in mind. This type of rotation is something that also happened in Solana quite heavy back at the end of last year, kind of right around the inauguration also. It was pretty much the pinnacle of that going on with Solana. You all remember what happened with Solana around Trump's inauguration, right? It was a bull trap. Anyways, we're discussing this idea of the 7 weeks leading into September 7th, and over here is September 7th, and if I worked backwards till today, it's 49 days. Yeah, you could also see that calculator right over here. It's nice and easy on this website. 48 days. Now keep this in mind. The new moon in July is 45 days before the September 7th total lunar eclipse. And of course, 7 weeks is 49 days. So we're talking about just a couple days difference. And of course, none of this is supposed to be exactly the same. We're just considering patterns here. So if we identify a pattern, it helps us determine the higher probability of how things will go in the future, right? And remember, I've covered this already, but if we take from the June 22nd lows that I was talking about a little bit earlier, and you were to add 7 weeks to that, it gets you to August 10th. Interesting, right? Considering that's right around the August full moon. And August and full moons have been like top vibes for us lately. It's kind of interesting. Remember, we are in a lunar eclipse. So lunar eclipse, or sorry, we're in a lunar cycle. Apologies. And in a lunar cycle, things are definitely different from when we're typically in a solar cycle. So it doesn't actually confuse me too much, the fact that we've been topping or going up pretty much on the new moons, especially for altcoins. But anyways, this gives us like a 2-week window between the August 10th, 11th timeframe and the August new moon, which I've been putting emphasis on for the past year as a significant time frame for the entire market, as that'll be the last new moon before eclipse season. And in our last cycle in 2021, Bitcoin actually pushed up bullish all the way into the second lunar eclipse of the lunar cycle, which was right here, by the way, right around the top. And that aligns with the September 7th eclipse in this cycle that we're in now. So it aligns with that. It doesn't mean it needed to copy, but it did. It did, and it was even more bullish this time around, which was something we also anticipated, especially because of the fact we didn't have a new all-time high in Ethereum, and we didn't have a true alt season yet. So this information from the last cycle regarding the solar and the lunar cycles is how I was able to determine that Bitcoin would go higher into July and August, regardless of how deep the correction was for March and April. And that is now confirmed to be pretty much the most accurate analysis month by month that I've ever shared. And what's even more mind-blowing is the fact that I shared that over a year before it happened. And that's proven in my crypto decoding blueprint, which was created in May 2024, and it was released at the beginning of June 2024. So this information was giving you that data over a year in advance. So we're pretty much in those final moments now before things to start to get truly exciting. And I think what we just saw in XRP breaking into a new all-time high, as Bitcoin has also entered price discovery, and as well we're seeing Ethereum catch back up to its upper range. This is really proving that things are about to start getting really exciting. And I think the Ethereum chart is starting to support that, considering a majority of the leaking out that we're seeing from Bitcoin dominance is draining straight into Ethereum right now. And now ETH is starting to look how it did back in December 2020 heading into January 2021. And I believe I sort of showed you that moments ago. Let me go over to this chart. So we're talking about December, January 2020, and it was right here, this moment. Note, we had a major correction, and this kind of Bart head moment and a little bit of a backup phase before we went straight through the golden pocket. Well, that is kind of reminiscent of what we just experienced over here, where we see C19 crash, tariff crash. We see this little bump up over here and a backup phase. That is also what we've got recently. Might look a little cleaner on the daily chart. So this bump up, backup phase, perfectly back tested the 382 fib, and it's been raging to the upside since. So this setup we're getting right now is really similar. It's really, really similar. But the thing is how many days can ETH just keep going up and up and up and up before a little bit of a pullback? And you could see over here, right when we got above the 888 is around that 30% correction we had in a single day. And we were only about where we're at now. Okay, maybe a little bit lower, you know? I mean, imagine it was to happen this week, it would be pushing you down to like 3,400. But one thing that is a little awkward is there's going to be a major CME gap on ETH now. And there's even a gap around 3,000. That would be nasty. I don't think we do that now. That would make sense to do in September. So whatever, man. Just send this thing to the moon already. It's boring. It's boring talking about corrections, right? Like, I'm over it. The only people who are considering corrections right now are people who waited to buy, right? Like, the only reason I talk about them is because I need to, as a leader in this space and a neutral technical analyst. When we're seeing Bitcoin dominance drain this dramatically, and we're seeing ETH just straight line breakout and everything getting very bullish, all tied to a popular exoteric event in cryptocurrency, which was Crypto Week and Donald Trump signing over some new law about stablecoin regulations, you know, like that's fishy stuff. That should make you be mentally prepared for a little wacky, wild, you know, chop. So don't say I didn't tell you so, but that's kind of the place we're in right now. And I just showed you that's how alt seasons could get. You know, look at this move right here. This was probably a 50%. Okay, so this was a 30% correction before pushing up another leg higher on the CME chart. This is just the kind of stuff we do when we're breaking out. I've showed you plenty of examples of this. Dogecoin chart, probably 50%. There you go. 50% before another leg higher. Over here, this golden pocket move, 45% before going higher. It's just what altcoins do. So tough call right now because we've already had major corrections in the midst of all of this, but we do get these tiny moves along the way. They seem dramatic in the midst of it, but when you pause and wait a couple days, it's typically all good in the hood again. So I want to finish up this section and then get back into our charts, but the fact that it's taken Ethereum this long, let me get back into the Ethereum chart. The fact that it's taken Ethereum this long and we've still yet to see a new all-time high on Ethereum, this is definitely making me consider that this cycle can extend into Q4, mostly because of the timing of everything. But again, I need to wait and see what happens between now and the upcoming total lunar eclipse to make any definitive calls. It's important for us to take things one step at a time, of course. Also, really quickly, before we dive into the charts, I just wanted to share a gem that I found that could be something that we'll mark in our calendars. And it's yet another correction into the April 7th date, which we started today's decode with. And keeping this 47 code in mind, if we were to take 4 months and 7 days from that 4/7 date, 4 months and 7 days later, we end up on August 13th, which literally happens to be the 225th day of this year, which is the code for our year we're in, the 225 code, removing the 0 using the rules of numerology. And what better timing could we have to discover this gem than on Red Pill 225? So because this date lands in a time frame that many fractals I've worked with are pointing to regarding more bullish energy for the crypto market, this makes me feel that around August 11th, as I shared here, through the 13th could be a very positive time for Bitcoin and of course the overall crypto market, including specifically XRP. I'm going to take a quick sip of water. I'll be right back. All right. Just test the audio. We're good. So again, August 11th through 13th, probably going to be a very bullish energy for the crypto market because in all past price discovery breakout phases for XRP, it took about 27 to 29 days to top after bottoming in the horizontal trading range that it was trading in. And actually, even in our last alt season, let me show you real quick regarding the XRP chart and the last alt season, which was, XRP didn't really get to have the alt season back then. Didn't really get to be a part of it. But if we take from here going backwards, you see on day 29 we started bottoming, and from there we were up 343%, which is very interesting because 343 is 7 times 7 times 7. And I was just telling you about this decode here, this 777 jackpot number. Pretty wild, right? All right. There you have it. So, definitely something to keep in mind. We took about 4 weeks or a calendar month from this bottoming energy till things getting a little bit overheated and extended. And remember, in those final days of an alt season vibe, we're getting 20 to 40% candles. And in the recent breakout that we had, wasn't this candle only like 15%? Yeah, this was only 14%. So usually when things get really, really overheated and we have the final days of the alt season, you'll see 40% candles. It's pretty normal stuff. So just keep this in mind. And we know XRP can have a 40% or close to 40% candle at these higher prices, because look at this date over here of March 2nd. This was a really, annoying day, but it is what it is. Donald Trump on Truth Social, while it was a weekend, a Sunday, releasing that the strategic reserve was going to have XRP and Cardano or whatever. Perhaps many of you remember that. But look, that's a 34% candle in a single day when we're already trading at the $2 to $3 range. So it's very much possible, a single day, to have that much movement. That's kind of how things end. So just keep that in mind. And I'll be honest, we have such limited data with that metric that I just shared with you before about the 27 to 29 day thing that it's not even worth putting too much weight on it, but it does align with everything that I've spoken about so far. So in my opinion, it'd be so much easier to judge XRP topping out by just looking at the weekly RSI and when it starts getting into the 90 territory. And as of right now, I think we're just around 71. Yeah, we're just around 70.6. So, of course, it will tick up again on the weekly close that's coming in later tonight. But still, we have more room to go before heading into that 90 territory. And on the straight line breakouts, we'd usually see about 95 on the weekly RSI for an altcoin. And we can, of course, even go higher in price after that happens. We can hit 95 on the RSI. We could have a little bit of a correction, and then price can go higher as that is, and then we could have lower RSI to follow that. That's just a bearish divergence. That's actually quite typical to see at the end of an altcoin rally. So keep that in mind for when we're looking at, keep that in mind when you're looking at any altcoin that you're invested in, especially when it comes to de-risking or taking profits. And actually, let me just quickly share with you what the hell I'm talking about, because that could be confusing for some. Let me show you here. All right, this is kind of a good example. So we have a straight shot RSI to 95 on the weekly. And then over here, we had quite a bit of a correction, but then you see that the RSI then topped at about 93. Here it was 95, here it was 93. But the price went significantly higher than where it was over here, right? It went up an additional 600% 7 weeks after it topped here. Now that's possible. Okay. And this is why I've been entertaining that that move could actually happen for us inside of the month of October, November. It just, well, again, we'll have to revisit this. It's not something to put too much energy into right now because it'll be theoretical. We need to see how this month of August goes. Now, let's get into these charts and review the setup for the week ahead as well as our upcoming weekly close. I actually want to quickly touch on Mercury retrograde since we talked about that in our last podcast. We want to mark off the price that Bitcoin closed at on July 18th as Mercury was stationing retrograde. We actually did have our correction into Mercury retrograde. It doesn't seem like a lot, but it did in fact happen. It's not like we just rallied and broke through. We had about a 5% correction from this local top down to the wick lows, tail lows on July 18th, and we're going to mark our close price at 118K, which is right around kind of where we've been at this weekend. So exact price was 118 on the nose. Damn. All right. So here we are. And the reason we're doing this is because we need to keep this number in mind in case we do see a pump and dump back to a similar price as 118K on August 11th when Mercury stations direct again, which by the way is still very possible even with expansion in the altcoins, and that's because of Bitcoin's dominance. So what I mean by that is we can see this move. I kind of want to delete this just momentarily so you could understand what the hell I'm talking about. Kind of something like that. Okay, where we do get a top, and then in the final like 20% of Mercury retrograde, we come back down into this price over here, and then we'll see how the shadow period goes. But this will be reminiscent of what happened in this iteration right here, where we could have this kind of like chop. Here, we had this actually quite a big correction. We had a rise into the very end of Mercury retrograde, but look at this. Right as it was stationing direct, major correction that brought you down to the same price that you were trading at. This also happened in the month of August. So, like, literally unbelievable how we had what seemingly was a very positive bullish Mercury retrograde time frame, but then once we got to the final 48 hours, we had a bit of a correction. So this is something to absolutely keep in mind, especially with this shadow period leading into the eclipse season. So of course I would want this all to be just very bullish and up, up, up forever, but I think it can be for altcoins, even with Bitcoin doing this type of move that you just saw. Now let's look at some more traditional technical analysis. Of course, we need to do that. Bitcoin looking pretty good today on a Sunday. Where was the CME close? It was at 170. Okay, so not a big difference, but ETH is going to have a major gap. And at this time, it's kind of annoying to talk about gaps, but they are a thing until they're not a thing. And they've been a thing for a while now, since 2018. So we need to consider that. Let's look at the weekly. Where are we at? Bitcoin, not accurate. That's that's more accurate. Ooh, that's like a top candle. That is not what we like. No, we don't want that type of candle. That's not a good candle. Okay, that's indecisive. And Bitcoin dominance is absolutely shitting right now, which makes me not worried about that. The Bitcoin dominance thing is very elusive right now. And you want to know why? Because Bitcoin dominance has been perpetually in an uptrend following a parallel channel now for like 130 years. Like literally since 2023, Bitcoin just been holding this parallel channel. So if this wasn't part of the equation, I would look at this weekly close that we're about to get and I'd be like a little bit more worried. Because you don't want this type of doji at a after a rally. It's just not the it's not a good thing. One second. All right, let me look at some of the moving averages. So we have all of our moving averages, all of our key EMAs moving up in bullish posture. Love to see that. Got still looking great on the 8 and the 55, sloping now up above 85K. So that's also very good to see. Things are looking good, guys. Like, this is not moving up too quick. It's actually the speed of which it's moving up looks very good. And this will be a bi-weekly close. Okay, so who cares about the weekly close? This is going to be a bi-weekly close. I am so glad I looked at this because this looks a lot more. This looks right. Okay. This is good to see. So this will be a bi-weekly close and price discovery. Very, very nice. Same thing for XRP. It will be a bi-weekly close in price discovery. So this is very nice. This is kind of exactly the environment that we want. A little bit of a breakout in Dogecoin, also up 50% on the week. These alts are waking up. You know, this is kind of what happens when Bitcoin dominance starts to fold over. So I expect the next 48 hours, once the traditional markets open up, I definitely expect there to be a lot of volatility just because this crypto market is the only thing that's trading right now. And we had the Genius Act pass, you know, a lot of energy in the crypto market. Probably whales are doing what they do best, which is they're playing with emotions. And the FOMO's happening right now. So they know they're able to suck in a lot of people into this market. We'll see how this goes. But typically we do get a little bit of a shakeout around a new moon, especially the July new moon, whether that be 24 hours before, 48 hours before, or that be on the day of, like it happened last year, where on the day of we had quite a correction on the July new moon. But as of right now, everything in the macro looks awesome. Looks great. And we've already discussed that this inverse head and shoulders pattern over here, with you considering this being left shoulder, head, right shoulder in a more macro sense, this has a breakout target to around the high 130s, almost 140K. And then also we had a bull flag pattern that played out to the high 130s to right around 140K. So that would mean that it would make a lot of sense for the next major impulse we have to be right around 140K. I don't think we'll get to the full 150K. It would make a little bit more sense to not hit that milestone and just kind of trap somewhere like 140 to 145. That to me would be like on the upper end of things. And that's not crazy for Bitcoin to go up, you know, we're talking 25% move to 30% move max in price discovery. And if you look at what Bitcoin did over here between the 70, this was 69K, which was the last cycle's all-time high over here. If we took from 69K to where it topped out over here, that was about 56%. And that felt like a crazy move. So when we're just looking at a potential move of about 30% max, I wouldn't call that crazy. You know, I would call that a very technical thing to consider, especially with multiple patterns pointing to about 137, 139. 140 is just like a little bit uncomfortable, you know, because it's not quite 150 and it's not like some random 120, right? We already hit 123. So that's kind of my take, whether it be from the psychological perspective or it be from the side of the technicals. I think that does seem to be more in the cards for the month of August for Bitcoin to hit around 140K. Now, let's head over to Ethereum. I don't have so much to say on ETH because we're sort of just range bound, but we're heading up into an area that was like effectively a triple top for us. And it's a level of danger for sure. Like, this is a area where you can see over here, this was our major alt season spike. This was a blow off top at the time. We got back to a similar level and also had another large correction. Let me turn off some of these moving averages. And you could kind of see like around this level of 4,000, ETH has trouble. And our highs are still under 5K. So anything around like 3,500 to 4,000 has been danger zone for ETH, especially around 4,100. You know, that was like kind of our blow off top over here. Rejection, rejection, rejection. And this rejection led to a 60 fucking 6% correction. That's crazy. But anyways, now we're just rallying straight line back up to similar resistance levels, and that's why I get cautious here with ETH, because every time it's gotten back since it's been yeah, the whale's dump. Now, I do think price discovery is coming very soon for ETH. I think it would be most sensible for it to happen at the end of this month, heading into August. We do have the FOMC meeting, which, we've talked about a couple times. I'm not putting too much of my emphasis on that right now, just because we know we have a lot of weird shit going on between Trump and Fed Chair Powell, and they're talking about how Chair Powell might resign and how Trump could allegedly fire him. And I'm like, I don't know how people are entertaining such a thing, that the Federal Reserve, anybody can get fired by the president. Like, the president is under the Federal Reserve. Like, I don't know how people don't know this. Like, this is basics. Federal Reserve is like God in the economy. You don't fire God. Like, God fires everybody else. All right. So it's the Federal Reserve that picks presidents. It's the Federal Reserve that picks who wins the Grammys. Like, that's my truth, like, it's the Federal Reserve who picks who the prime minister is in the world. Like, it's not the other way around. So yeah, I don't know what people are on about, talking about how Trump could fire Chair Powell. It's just not the way it goes. I know it makes for a nice, like, juicy wrestling match though, like the WWF. I know they love that. They love this, like, conflict. As long as there's conflict, we get distracted and then we fall for it all, right? Anyways, who cares? Fed Chair Powell is insignificant. Notice what I said before. It's the Fed. That's the god here. It's not Chair Powell. That guy's just a talking head. He's a random dude they're putting in that position. The same thing with Elon, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Donald Trump, you name them, Joe Rogan. They're all in that posture because they were a good boy. They listened to orders and they signed paperwork and contracts, and they were given a role, and they play that role very well. This is why the flip-flop is always happening. You guys have probably noticed this too. That's why waking up is such a gift, because you realize that the true enlightenment is by no longer picking sides. It's no longer falling for that division. It's no longer falling for the polarity of it all. It's just seeing it for what it is in the neutral sense. So getting back to this, ETH is kind of at dangerous levels right now, and RSI is pretty damn high. It's sitting around 88. Where are we on the weekly? Nothing too dangerous just yet, so we still have some room to go. Of course, I've already discussed this moments ago. Like, I think we have way more room to the upside if I'm to even entertain the idea of an alt season, of course. Would I like to see ETH break out into new all-time highs now? Yes. Please. Get this over with. Like, please. I don't want to, I'm over it. I don't want to wait any longer. Like, I kind of want the bear market more than the bull run at this point. Guys got to remember, I started the red pill back here. Like, it's been four years of this, it's been a wild ride. I want alt season just as much as you guys do. So yeah, here we are. We're pressing up against a very significant resistance level for ETH, and pretty much once you close, let me see the highest weekly close we've ever had. I mean, it's unfair to really talk about this area, so let's call it 4,000. Shit, 4,100. 4,100 weekly close is enough to be like sayonara. We could be seeing candles like this. Multiple 40% candles. So it wouldn't be weird though if we broke all-time highs and then we had a little bit of chop around it, and then again, like maybe some stall out like we do over here, where maybe it's like a 3 weeks or so of like a 30 or 40% correction for the altcoins, and then we have one final impulse into like October, November. I'm still very, very open-minded to that. And it's not about like what people say typically in this situation, like moving the goalpost. Like, fucking get rid of that shit. Like, look at it like nature, okay? In Mother Nature, you know that it could start snowing in as early as November, but sometimes you don't get snow until February. And sometimes when you get snow, it's really light, and then your biggest blizzard happens in March. Sometimes you get a blizzard in December. Sometimes you live in a place that's so cold where it's just perpetually snowing, okay? That's kind of what's happening here. So if it's a month or two off or whatever, don't get too relax, okay? Relax. That's how you need to be in this moment, because we're talking about all this different energy and all of these things that are impacting this energy. And guess what, guys? You are part of it too. Your feelings and your belief, it all impacts this. Think about it. If tomorrow we all just stop believing in all of this shit, it would all crumble. But it has to be a thing because we believe in it. We believe in presidents. We believe in politicians. We believe in the dollar. We believe in democracy. We believe in all of this. Therefore, it is. And it only exists because we believe in it. And we are the majority, obviously. The people who quote unquote rule the world are only 0.1% of the global population, even less, 0.001% of the global population. We have the numbers. But unfortunately, the level of consciousness amongst that 99.9% doesn't want freedom, doesn't value sovereignty, doesn't believe in itself. It believes in all of the things that we're doing. And it is so. So let's wrap this up. ETH looking pretty good, but definitely a little too high too soon sort of deal. It's nice to see Doge breaking out finally. Let's get to XRP. I know I've talked a lot about XRP, but we are about to have another weekly close and price discovery. We would obviously have the bi-weekly and price discovery. We'll touch on the monthly close, I guess, the next week's podcast. But as for daily RSI, it's like not even that bad. Like in the immediate short term, we could definitely rally some more. But again, this first week of Mercury retrograde, you definitely see a little weird stuff going on. So we're in price discovery, guys, and like the immediate targets we're looking at, we could just pull this local fib right here, and it'll probably be around 450. Turn this on. But you guys know my most important target is 760 to 860. 7.6 is a big number, especially for this year. Remember this Leave the World Behind decode where I talked a lot about the 76ers connections? And obviously Trump is all tied to the, this kind of patriotism vibe and has this 1776 OG America energy tied to it. So definitely something to keep in mind with the 7.6 connections. And I'm not just pulling that out of nowhere. We also have Ripple giving you 76 in the main cipher. So 76 to 860. Those are my two initial upside targets that I'm looking for on the major impulses. I'm not really concerned about the stuff in between that, the $4 to $5 stuff, but we also have 580 to consider, and then the larger target, which is 15. Obviously, that's like the more extreme target, but the 860, I very much see that happening by the code and gematria. I think I don't really have a whole lot to say right now with XRP because we're breaking into price discovery. So yeah, like if we are to have any pullbacks, it's like, I think technically to test the breakout candle right here at around 310 would be okay. But like, we don't need to do that. We don't need to do that. This can just continue. Yeah. So, yep, this is great. We were stuck in this horizontal trading range for 200 fucking days. It's time to expand. Here we are. We're moving. All the hard work, everything has led to this moment. There's no reason to be diverting from the overall plan. Let the plan play out. So, yep, XRP is looking juicy right now. Still has so much more room on weekly RSI. I mean, we're just hitting 70. This thing could go to 95, as I talked about a little bit earlier. In the last cycle, we had, even during the craziest bullish moment for XRP, technically the highest prices, we didn't really get an alt season last time, so there's no point of talking about that. It's more over looking back to this cycle over here, which we talked about already. So yeah, I'm not going to take up too much time on this. I think the weekly updates that we could give on XRP might add some additional value. But for right now, trading on a weekend, it's just not significant price action for me. to be breaking it down so philosophically. And plus, I already gave you the decode to consider, and we've talked about the upside price targets on XRP so much now. So let's move on. We're looking at Spell. I don't remember the last time I looked at this project, but I clearly have because we have some data. Let's look at, ooh, oh, these charts are so annoying when they have this like random candle that just messes everything up. I wish TradingView would allow you to delete this kind of stuff. One second, guys. All right. Looking good. Looking great. Okay, so we have Spell, which is down 98.4%. My God. So it's done nothing. And it's gotten rejected at this same level right below the 3 times, separated by quite a bit of time. So this is a August 2022. This is March 2024, and this is January 2025. So these were all separated by pretty much years apart. This is a tough level. So what does that mean? And I had it marked off in the last red pill. So clearly we were, pointing out the significance of this. Once we pop above this 382 and can get like a daily above 0.002 cents, there's going to be thin air to around here at the bottom of the golden pocket. And then effectively, I mean, you really don't have any trading range up until between the 786 and the 888 fib. And that's about 740% from that level. So from where we are now, dude, if this thing makes it up to the 702 fib, we're talking about 1000%. So I think whoever wanted me to look at this probably knows some of the things that I like to look for in like late stage altcoin picks. And this is one of them. The only thing that I don't like about this is the fact that there's no chart history before the C19 crash. I like seeing how this project I like seeing how projects traded before the C19 crash and how did it react during, and then where are we at in comparison to that today. Like for instance, a couple people brought up Tezos today, XTZ. And that's fine, like it's doing well, I guess, but like zoom out, guys. Like, this is the least impressive thing. And some of you might be like, Waters, what are you talking about? Where the C19 crash was here, dude. We're at the same price as the fucking C19 crash. You know that Bitcoin is 2,800% higher than where this was on this date to today. While this thing is the same price. And it's actually gone lower than the C19 crash. So if you bought anything at the C19 crash, you would have felt like a fucking genius. Like, I mean, look at XRP during the C19 crash. It was like 11 cents, guys. Like, I'm not joking. It hit 11 cents. So like if you bought at 13 to today, you were up 2,600%. So it's just like getting in Bitcoin. This actually shows how impressive Bitcoin is. The fact that Bitcoin's up practically higher than that. Let's look at ETH for comparison, like around the same levels. ETH 3,000%. So this Tezos thing is not impressive. It's been a horrible long-term hold, worse than XRP, which is rare to say such things like so confidently, but it is absolutely the case. And yeah, it's having a good couple of days, but like that's what shit does during these parts of the cycle. So, I mean, all I'm bringing this up for is like the educational piece. Like, I like to see how things did before the C19 crash. I think that's a very, very important metric for me in my selection. But again, that means that I'm going to be going with coins that are not hype. They're not like interesting anymore like some of the new stuff would be. And that's fine. That's my gamble. But I guess I'm doing pretty well across the board in my overall portfolio, enough to the point where I don't need to concern myself too much with what my venture capital portfolio is doing. And this is the type of stuff I'd usually put in my venture capital portfolio, stuff that has 1,000% to get to just the golden pocket. I would say that that's insane opportunity. And if it was to make it back to the all-time high, which I'm not sure if this data makes any sense right now because there could have been supply dilution. It's very common. So yeah, this would have a 4,500% move to make it back to just a little shy of 3 cents. That would be fucking mind blowing. So this is something that I would usually call just venture capital. You throw in $100 or whatever, and you see where things go. I mean, if this thing were to go back to $100, or sorry, go back to 0.25, you know, that's 4,000% from here. Like, it's pretty nuts to turn a grand into 4 grand. Or sorry, to turn $100 into 4 grand, excuse me. I watched this. Somebody sent me this video the other day, and this guy was talking about like 10x's, and he had no idea how much percent a 10x was, and he called himself a hedge fund manager. I was like, whoa, that's scary. And jokes aside, I don't think this thing will make it to the 1618. I'm not even sure if this thing will make it into price discovery. I already told you guys that I think the 2021 cycle for most of the altcoin market was the dot-com bubble. So I don't consider what happened in 2017 like the dot-com bubble, because 2017 we weren't popular. It wasn't that big of a deal. There was only a couple projects that anybody even knew about, and honestly, it wasn't that big of a deal. In 2021, on the other hand, it was a huge deal with what happened with FTX, Michael Saylor being part of the conversation, Doge ripping to the upside because of Elon, right? Pretty much the world's richest man. You also had in that cycle Terra Luna crash, right? You also had NFTs. You have all this Web3 stuff. You had DeFi. You have meme coins at a whole different level, right? So all I'm trying to say is I think 2021 bubble burst was the dot-com bubble for us. And now, because everything's accelerated with crypto, Bitcoin is like the Amazon of it all. You know, like it rose from the ashes, but it did have a 77% correction. You know, it's a big deal. And where are we at today? I mean, on total market cap, we're just neck and neck with Amazon. And I think we'll surpass Microsoft. So pretty wild. And I don't mean we. I'm not part of this. I didn't create Bitcoin. I'm just a guy with a microphone. All right. So Spell, it's definitely the type of play that I would look for putting in my venture capital portfolio. But I would not put a lot of money in this. This is not something that if you have 5 grand, you want to put a grand in. That's unsafe. You know, I do not recommend, even though we could get a major move with an alt season, right? Next, I can't believe I'm even looking at this, but this project is called Pudgy Penguins. Yeah, you heard that right. Ticker symbol Pengu. Guys, what the fuck are we looking at right now? Anyways, I'm going to pull a fib right here. I'm guessing we're at the 888. Yep. Okay, very typical. So I like this horizontal trading range, actually. I'm going to be mature here. I like this horizontal trading range. I'm pulling it from here on purpose just because this is like the first day of data and it's not very trustworthy. What was their correction here? Okay, 92%. That's massive, but that's pretty typical. But look at the structure. So look, we get above the 0.5 fib. We tapped on the 7/8 on the 618 right there below the golden pocket. I'd like to see that. Then we came back down even slightly below the 382, but a retest of the 382 is classic, and we never got back to the 236, which is a sign of strength. So the pop up from this moment right here, which also aligns with June 22nd, a very important date now that I could see, we're up 300% from there in a month. So massive play. Congratulations to anyone who is buying sub 382 fib, or if you were buying anywhere below 001, because during this 60% corrective phase, anywhere you positioned yourself today, you'd be up 300 to 400%. So congratulations on this absolutely stupid nonsense. But that's crypto, guys. And this is kind of like how you want to play the game in the final moments. Don't do what I did in the last cycle with Dogecoin. Okay. The last cycle with Dogecoin, I'll be vulnerable with you guys. I was so against Doge, mostly because Elon is so fucking annoying, right? Like, just, ugh. And you know, when you just like, when you are judging somebody, I was doing that. I wasn't neutral. I wasn't neutral. Doge was already annoying, and then Elon was already very annoying. And then when it topped at the SNL, skit that he did, I like was happy that that happened. And that's not how you're supposed to be. You should be a man about this. Or if you're a woman, be a woman about this. Don't have any emotion towards it. Don't hate it. Don't date it. Just trade it, right? And I wish I didn't look at Doge the way that I did back when I got into crypto heavily as an investor, because I would have made probably majority of my money in that play. So this cycle, I've treated things a little bit differently. First of all, Doge has a technical pattern that it likes to play out. So I said, I'm going to trade the charts this time around. I'm not going to let all this other fluff get in the way. And returning back to pudgy penguins or whatever the fuck this nonsense is, that's kind of like the same vibe. Who cares how silly this is? If there's a technical setup and it's already lost 90% of its value, why not speculate if you have a couple $100 to burn, right? I wouldn't put my entire life savings into this shit. But it's kind of where we're at. Now, I don't really want to entertain entries on this right here at this level because, again, we're talking about 40 or 50% back to the prior all-time high, which was only set earlier this year. So we have very limited chart history. And up to this 1618 is a 600% move, which is really good. Like considering where a 600% move is for XRP right now, you're talking about like a really crazy move for XRP. Like we would need a $25 XRP, which is possible, but like way less possible than it happening on this bullshit pudgy penguin, right? Now, is that me telling you to invest in Pengu and not invest in XRP? No, that's not it. I would be opting out for some advice that I've shared with you guys before this breakout even happened, and it's XLM and HBAR, and we see what happened there. That was pretty fucking awesome because I talked about this play, and pretty much the exact day later, we've had a 100% breakout. Right now, we're hovering around 80%. It's pretty nice. So, I would not personally be getting into this. I would rather get like something like XLM or maybe even HBAR or maybe even some more Doge, even though Doge is like 10% up today. Again, because I see these sorts of things you want to get in very early, and I don't like buying tops. That's just my thing. I just don't like buying tops. So, yeah. But again, if you said that back when Doge was already breaking out in the last cycle, for instance, over here, if you were like, I don't like buying tops, and then it went up another 1000%, you would feel like a moron. So that's why I'm telling you this play has a technical 600% move to the upside. That's not unfair of me to say, right? We have room to go. And in a true alt season, things can get crazy. So just entertain with a linear setting on. We can get to that 26-cent territory. That would be the 6-spot fib extension. And I've seen crazy shit where we hit the 10-spot fib extension. So that we're talking about 1,300% move. That would be like mimicking what Doge did in that same example back in 2021, where you're buying kind of late and you're hoping to get like the exact top. That's not my favorite way to play it. Just being honest. Now we have Titan X. This was a little bit confusing because with the votes, we had Titan Swap and then we also had ticker symbol Titan X. This was the only chart that I could find. I think it was this one, like a wrapped ether chart. And let's do what we can. So we have data that goes back to the end of 2023, and it's been in price discovery to the downside. So we're 99% down from this cluster of wicks to the top. But since it's lost 99.3% of its value, pretty much, that's not good. So this has been just losing value over and over and over again. I would not want to be too... Yeah, I'd be careful. Be careful with this. All right. Now, one thing to consider is that if this thing could break above this level right here, let me put a horizontal line for you. Which is right around this 888 fib. We have thin air all the way up until this 1618. So from where we are now to this is a possible play for this Titan X project, which is 3,000% to the upside. That again is like full-blown alt season vibes. And then we do have a W pattern in play, which we'll see. Does that get us to the 0.702? It gets us to the top of that 786. So I like that. That's a good thing to see. We're getting a little bit of a rejection on the 382, but it could be something like this. And then we don't kind of get this full move, and we come down in September, maybe boom, and then we have a big surge like that, and then the end, and then this thing goes to zero because it's basically already zero. It's like 1,000 zeros, right? I think it's six, literally 6 zeros. So this thing's just going to probably continue to go to shit over time. But in the meantime, you know, there is a hell of a play ahead if you can get positioned in this thing. Again, I would not put more than 1% of my portfolio in this play. This is very, very sketchy stuff. So for something to lose 99% of its value, that does not mean that you should be banking all of your life savings, even though it could go up potential 3,000, 2,000%. You're just kind of buying trash and hoping for a little bit of market cap to roll over in it. And then you're going to need to know how to get out. You know, you're really going to need to know how to get out of this thing, because I know it's tempting to just try to wait and wait and wait until we hit some arbitrary target. But that's not the way to do it, especially on projects like this that are probably a little bit more difficult to sell. You know, you probably have to do them on some decentralized exchanges and stuff. So just be careful. Especially with projects like this. If something's already lost 99% of its value, you know it's not a good play. Now, let's go to Beam. It's been some... Whoa. Oh, wow. Okay, this thing broke lower. My God. So, yeah, March was the time to get out of this stuff. Last year. Had a 90% correction, and around the end of last year, pretty much a big M pattern. And we've come back to the launch price effectively. So this we need to extend now, because that's the full macro fib pull. Crazy, man. Big drop. So getting back to the prior tops, it's about a 400% move. Not bad. Let me pull this, turn this off. And I could entertain this 1618 being hit. So around there, it's a pretty nice move. It's around 7 cents. 700% from where we are. Not bad. I think that's a great play, potentially. So keep this in mind. That is definitely in the cards for this particular play. Entertaining the 4236 is a little tough, especially like with this sort of breakdown, whilst Bitcoin and even Ethereum have been doing much, much better. So this is not following the type of move we're seeing with ETH. It's not following anything with Solana. It's not following anything with Binance token. It's not following the popular stuff you're seeing in like the ISO 222 arena, like, you know, XLM, XRP, XDC, etc. This is just doing its own thing, and it has not looked so good. So I'd be very careful on this stuff. Also, this is not the best, right? To just be sitting in something that's perpetually going lower, as you're seeing even the top projects holding up and doing pretty well. It's a sign to not get so fancy with your portfolio, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, let's move on, wrap this podcast up with Superverse. So this has been looking actually great. Yeah, this looks really good. So we had this bottom in October 2023, brilliant, and we've since had a major rally up of 1,000% to where we are today, looking great. No data before the C19 crash, but that's fine because, well, we're holding up at least. So with this horizontal line we have here, I'm just going to have a support level, because it's clear to me that around the 382 macro 382 fib, we have a clean support at around 37, 36, 38 cents. Pretty obvious too, because at the end of this bull run, which was the end of last alt season, once we broke below this level right here of around 38 cents, we cascaded to the downside, had this macro double bottom, and then that's since marked our lower half of the horizontal trading range. We're probably not going to revisit that till the end of the cycle, but this does, for the pattern traders out there, they can see the formation of a head and shoulders, right? So I'm not calling that though, but it is sketchy that we got up to the same level we got rejected at the bull trap of last alt season. We got that level back in December into January of this year, and we've since had a major correction back to the same support level, and now the buyback has been pretty weak as well. So whilst ETH has come back up into this region as we speak, it's had a much more powerful buyback. Stuff like this is lagging behind, and that's kind of normal, you know, for it to lag behind. But one second. But yeah, like, you don't have too much chart history to go on with these things. So that's why it's easy to be in my vibe right now, where I'm like, I don't know. I don't think that's happening. So I'm gonna pull this down. Yeah, 1618 is possible in the linear pull, somewhere around 785. I actually don't even like that fib pull. I would say that this local one would be a little better. Taking things step by step. So yeah, 4236 sitting at 9. That's very much a possibility. That's about 1,000%, right? So that's 9 right there. It's 927%. That would be a very nice move for this particular project. So I'll mark that off there. Probably be better to mark off 8 actually, just to not get too ahead of ourselves. And from the peak back here in last alt season to that move up to 8 is about 65%. And, you know, believe it or not, that's what Cardano did in the last cycle. It did not go much higher than where it was in the prior cycle before that, in the end of 2017 to 2018. So seeing a slightly new all-time high is by no means weird. But remember, it's all about lower entries on these venture capital plays. So we're talking about a 700% move ahead. That's pretty incredible, you know? So keep that in mind. As for any downside in the short term, I'm not entirely sold that we'll be going any lower than what we did on June 22nd. That's kind of out of the cards for me, but I do entertain that Bitcoin could have a weird week ahead. And most projects, if Bitcoin is to come down to like 113, which again, we're only bringing that up because of the CME gap that's right here. If Bitcoin were to come down to this like 113 level, let's just call it another 4% correction. That 4% correction could definitely create a 10% or 15% correction in a lot of altcoins. But remember, what did I tell you at the beginning of today's podcast? It depends on the project we're talking about. Look at Doge. By the time the market opens up tomorrow, Doge could already be at 28, 29 cents. So a 10% pullback from here would just be what we were trading at in the middle of today. It won't be that much. So a lot of this has to do with Bitcoin dominance breaking down, which it's clearly happening very violently right now. So this is a good thing. This is the perfect setup we want. Bitcoin and price discovery, XRP and price discovery. A lot of the top alts that we talk about are in the midst of breaking out. We just saw Doge now also breaking higher than where it was in May. This is good signs. XLM back to where it was in the end of last year. HBAR, same posture. I think XDC even as well. We see ETH doing the same thing. This is all a very good setup. So I'm going to wrap this one up here. We need to see how this plays out over the next 48 hours. Remember, new moons tend to be a little dumpy, so it would not shock us if around the 23rd into the 25th we were to see a little bit of a pullback, even though I don't like talking about pullbacks right now. But I'm just sharing it to mentally prepare you guys, warn you, but ultimately overall, we still have a lot of room to the upside into the month of August. So I appreciate and I'm grateful for every single one of you, wishing you all a beautiful rest of your weekend in the Matrix. Much love.